It's amazing how quiet the room got. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for your patience. This is incredible to see so many people in here and still waiting to get in. We'll hopefully get them through rather quickly to join us. So, hello, I'm Courtney Brown, Vice President of Strategic Impact and Planning at Lumina Foundation. And again, as I look around, there's so many familiar faces and so many new faces, so it's really exciting. And as you know, we've gathered today to delve into a topic that's at the forefront of so many Americans' minds, education beyond high school. As many of you know, in 2020, the world grappled with the challenges of a global pandemic. Uncertainty loomed over higher education landscape. Would students flood back to campus or stay home and opt for virtual learning? Or would they hesitate and not engage at all? Amidst the uncertainty, Lumina Foundation partnered with Gallup to cut through the guesswork. We went straight to the source, asking currently enrolled students, those who had paused their education, and even individuals who had never touched higher education about their plans, their concerns, and what was helping them to succeed. What we discovered was illuminating. As you're probably not surprised, COVID-related health concerns loomed large for many. But we also learned that financial aid packages provided crucial support for many to stay in. While the pandemic's grip loosened in 2021, enrollment continued to decline, so we went back to the students. And that year, we discovered the skyrocketing emotional stress, which led many students to contemplate putting their education on hold. Each year, our polling delves deeper, uncovering the multitude of reasons that hinder students from pursuing education beyond high school. From state and federal policies to questions of cost, campus safety, and the perceived value of education, we have left no stone unturned. Over the past several years, this report has brought us invaluable data and analyses, shedding light on the factors contributing to declining enrollment rates, dwindling confidence in the value of higher education, and the challenges facing today's students. But amidst our data-driven analysis, it is about the students. As you heard from Atalia and Sanaya, they are struggling through mental health issues, homelessness, work and family responsibilities, and the financial burden which often feels insurmountable. Their stories are just two of many that illustrate the challenges facing today's students. And it's stories like theirs that drive our work at Lumina Foundation, to ensure that every individual has the opportunity to access and succeed in quality education beyond high school. Beyond simply identifying problems, the Lumina Gallup report has empowered us to dig deeper, to uncover the root causes behind these trends, and to explore innovative solutions. From understanding the impact of student debt to addressing concerns about belonging and inclusivity, to digging into the multiple responsibilities students have outside of the classroom. This report helped us to better grasp the multifaceted nature of the student experience. And now, armed with this knowledge, we have a unique opportunity to enact meaningful change. Today, we're here to discuss what we've learned from the most recent Lumina Gallup report, and more importantly, to explore how we can translate those insights into concrete practices and policies that will make a difference in the lives of students across the country. This morning, we have an exciting lineup featuring two dynamic panels comprised of institutional leaders and policymakers. These are the individuals tasked with shaping the landscape of higher education, and their insights promise to be invaluable. Our panels will be moderated by journalists whose work you've likely seen. Together, we'll explore promising policies and practices that dismantle barriers and help ensure that every individual has the opportunity to pursue and succeed in education beyond high school. This morning, I urge you to listen with open minds and hearts. While some insights might be familiar, there is always room for new perspectives. Let's consider how we can leverage these insights to change the trajectory of countless lives, whether it's within our own communities, institutions, or at a broader policy level. So let's begin with my partner in this work, Stephanie Markin, a partner in the Education Division here at Gallup. Stephanie will provide us with some highlights from the most recent report. Stephanie.
Thank you, Courtney, and thank you all so much for joining the discussion. It's such a full room, and as Courtney mentioned, I know some of you are more or less familiar with our research, so thanks for engaging over the course of the last few years, and importantly, today. So as Courtney mentioned, this research has really been the culmination of multiple years in the making. You know, we've had the benefit over the course of the last 4 years to introduce some new questions that are really the result of the current moment in the state of higher education. And we've also had the benefit of actually tracking some key trends and key performance indicators that we know are important to all institutions and that many of you in this room are focused on. So this morning, I'm just going to kick us off with a few key highlights from the research, really showcasing places in which we've seen some key changes over the course of the last few years, and then important new trends that we've released for the first time this year. In case you missed it, over the last few months, the Lumina Gallup team has released a series of reports. In February, we shared more about the Hispanic and Black learner experience in the U.S., looking at 2-year, 4-year certification students, as well as those who've never enrolled before in post-secondary pathway and those who've stopped out temporarily, really to better understand their lived experience in higher education. We also, in March, released a report about state policies and how they're impacting people's decisions about where they might enroll in college, especially for those who are considering moving out of state to enroll for the first time in a college or university. And then in April, we just released a cost of college report, which really just underscores the importance of cost, which I'm sure comes as no surprise to many of you in this room today, which continues to be a major barrier, not just for currently enrolled students, but for those who are considering a post-secondary pathway for the first time or potentially returning. And then this morning, in case you missed it, we released a culmination of all of those important reports, our State of Higher Education report, which really just continues to showcase these key performance indicators I mentioned, including things like whether or not somebody's considered stopping out of higher education, the reasons students are considering stopping out, and what would get them to return to post-secondary pathway. So today I'll start with just a few key highlights from the research. Now, one of the benefits of this research that we've conducted in partnership with Lumina Foundation is that we're not just interviewing currently enrolled students, although that is a large portion of our sample, about 6,000 currently enrolled students each year who we're surveying. We're also interviewing those who are not currently enrolled to better understand what would bring them into a post-secondary pathway and what's the perceived value of a post-secondary pathway. And that really led us to ask this important question for the first time this year, which is just the extent to which people believe that various post-secondary pathways are extremely or very valuable to them. What you'll see here, which is really important given the current context in which higher education is operating, especially amidst declining enrollments, as Courtney mentioned, is that most Americans without a degree or credential report that these various post-secondary pathways are extremely or very valuable still, including a certificate, a certification, a bachelor's, and a graduate degree, and a 2-year degree too. And you'll see for the bachelor's population, 75% of those who we surveyed said this was an extremely or very valuable pathway. Now, we've also asked this important question over time. So over the course of the last 3 years, we've been able to track the extent to which people feel like a post-secondary pathway or education and training beyond high school is very important to achieving a successful career. And again, what you'll see here is that the majority of Americans for whom we survey report that a post-secondary pathway is important or extremely important, and compared to 20 years ago, it's as or more important than it was to have that education and training beyond high school in order to obtain that successful career. So we continue to see this concern about post-secondary value in the media and in the national conversation, but most of those who we interview feel like a post-secondary pathway is extremely or very valuable, particularly when we put it in the context of a career or a great job. Now, what we know about our research, too, though, is that there are many barriers facing these individuals. So despite the fact that many of our prospective students report that a post-secondary pathway would be extremely or very valuable to them, we also know that cost is a major concern for those who are considering a post-secondary pathway. So over the course of the last few years, we've asked individuals, have you considered enrolling recently, and what's keeping you from enrolling? And we continue to see cost is at the top of that list. You'll see the cost of the degree or the program was selected by 85% of our respondents as being a major reason they're not currently enrolled in a post-secondary degree or credential program. And that was true for all of our respondents. So one of the benefits of having more than 2,000 respondents is that we're able to look at the data by subgroups. looking at first-generation college students, individuals who are coming from lower-income households, those who are returning to post-secondary pathway, those who've stopped out from a particular pathway. We've also looked at by race, ethnicity, by gender, by age, and consistently what we find, regardless of income status, is that cost continues to be the most important reason that individuals are reporting they're not currently enrolled. And that was, of course, followed closely by work, which we find continues to be a competing responsibility that's really keeping a lot of Americans out of a post-secondary pathway. Now, cost isn't just important for those who are considering a post-secondary pathway. We also know it's really important for those who are already enrolled. So among the 6,000 individuals who we surveyed who were either in a certificate, certification, bachelor's, or associate program, we actually asked them if they'd considered stopping out in the past 6 months. About a third said they had considered stopping out in the past 6 months. So we'd consider those students who are at risk of not completing. And when we asked them why they'd considered stopping out, you'll see cost was the third most cited reasons students reported they'd considered stopping out of their post-secondary pathway. Now, of course, they followed issues of emotional stress and mental health, which are really taxing all of higher education as well as society more generally, as we've seen concerns about well-being have really increased precipitously since the pandemic. But we find that these two issues of importance, emotional stress and mental health, have really skyrocketed over the course of the last 4 years since we began measuring in partnership with Lumina Foundation around this issue of stopping out. Finally, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention what is attracting people to a post-secondary pathway in the first place, and it's jobs-related reasons. We find for those who report that they've considered enrolling in the past 2 years, when we ask them why they've considered a post-secondary pathway, jobs continue to be the most important reason. That's really what's at the forefront of their mind, more than other factors that we often measure, things like lifelong learning, desire to obtain additional skills. Most Americans are thinking about jobs and still see post-secondary pathways as a clear place in order to get that good first or greater job in their career pathway. So with that, I'd love to turn it over to our panelists and invite our first panelist to the stage. So we're joined by an amazing first panel, as Courtney alluded to. So moderating our discussion will be Goldie Blumenstick from the Chronicle of Higher Education, and she's joined by Chancellor Dondi Plowman from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. We also have Chancellor King from the State University of New York, and the President of Morgan State University, David Wilson. So please join me in welcoming them to the stage.
Good morning, everybody. So this panel is focused on the experiences and the perceptions of current students and non-students. And the theme, of course, of the day is the state of higher education. And I think we can all agree that at this moment, the state of higher education is tumultuous. So I think before we delve into sort of the planned topics for the conversation, I want to make sure we don't ignore the proximate issues facing higher education today, because perceptions of higher education are being shaped very much by what's happening on campuses and what people believe what's happening on campuses. So I want to start off with that with our panel, because it does have this is more than a perception problem. There are real issues being raised right now on hundreds of campuses across the country, issues about campus policing, issues about the rights and limits of student protest, issues about the role of faculty, the issue of the sense of the rights of students to feel welcome and welcome on their own campuses. So I would like to ask you all for just take a second, step back before we deal deeply in this, and help me sort of identify for this audience and frankly for myself, what do you think are some of the bigger, more lasting issues that have come up because of these campus protests and the dissent we've been seeing on campus this year? What are some of the things that are going to be sort of more defining principles for higher education next fall, 5 falls from now? And what's going to be lingering and matter?
You're going to let me start?
Yeah.
That's a hard question.
All right. Chancellor Plowman, go get him.
Okay. I think for us, we're in the midst of some of this right now. We don't have, commencement cannot come soon enough in a way. It's next week, but we are learning, all of us are learning, I believe, through this experience. And what are we learning? We're learning about, and the campus is learning, what is free speech really? And it's hard sometimes to accept that some of free speech includes things that we don't agree with and we don't like. I think another thing we're learning is how do you, as someone sitting in the chairs we sit in, how do you protect everyone's speech? How do you protect everyone's safety? How do you continue to be able to do the normal business that we're all involved in, going to class, taking finals, hosting commencement? So when those are things that we've set up, processes for doing things, and then in the midst of a crunch, you find how good or how weak your processes are, if I'm really being honest about it. And so I think there's I'll just stop right there. Those are some of the things we're learning on our campus.
I think that's exactly right. We are, I think, all grappling with striking the right balance between preserving and protecting student safety, which has to be paramount, and then protecting free expression and the robust exchange of ideas, which is essential to our mission in higher education. I will say, I think one of the long-term questions that I hope we'll grapple with at SUNY, and I hope the sector will grapple with, is how do we ensure that students are well prepared for civic dialogue? And I've been struck that there's been so little conversation over the last few weeks about the educational implications of this moment. How do we help students learn to approach issues with nuance? How do we make sure that students are informed by history in their development of their views? How do we help students figure out how to disagree agreeably? How do we help students separate between expressing your ideas and attacking people's identity? How do we help students think about what protests can and should look like, and how you can learn the best lessons from the civil rights movement and other eras of effective social justice protests? Those are big questions that I hope our faculty will grapple with our students, so that we better prepare this generation of students to lead us through the many challenges that we face, not just on the global stage, but climate change and the health of our democracy. We need our students to be prepared there, and I hope we can get to those questions. At SUNY, we've launched a project. We've identified 10 civic engagement and civil discourse fellows, faculty members who will help lead a system-wide conversation across our 64 campuses about how we foster healthy civic dialogue on our campuses.
It's terrific. President Wilson?
Yes, I also agree with what has been said. I'm president of Morgan State, and HBCU, one of the largest historically black colleges and universities in the country. And quite frankly, we have been having protests on our campus since late October. And they have been small in number, but they have been persistent, 15 students up to about 30 students. And I commenced to have conversations with them, wanted to know what's on your mind, because those protests were not anti-Semitic. They were designed, if you will, in this kind of humanistic space based on what they had seen as the response on the part, in this case, of Israel to the terrorist attack. And in the minds of the students, they basically were gathered around this notion of, individuals not having food and being killed in mass numbers. And so they wanted me to know all too well that they were not anti-Israel, right? So I think a few lessons that we as higher ed must take away from this moment, and we're going to be in a position where we're going to have to defend or walk away from some basic notions that have defined our genre. And I think one, as has been indicated by both of my colleagues, is the whole notion of the freedom of expression. And what does that look like on our campuses? And how do we make sure that everyone within the university community, not just students, but faculty and staff, everyone is sort of understanding that. And then once we reach agreement about what that looks like, then it seems to me that we as a genre must defend that. And I think the other basic concept that is sort of right under the surface is academic freedom. And that has been bubbling for a while, and it's a very difficult conversation for some to have, but that also is kind of on the edge of the protests. And I think it's going to call into question, once again, whether this notion that has defined American higher education, this sets us apart from higher education in the world. What is that going to look like for us going forward? And then the last is dialogue. I have to look at my own background briefly, and I say, you know, I am so thankful that the way I grew up and the way I came to college, it forced me, in a way, to be in the room with so many other people with so many different experiences. And I did not come through college just to be amongst individuals who had had the same experiences that I had. And those environments, if you will, were ones both at the undergraduate level and at the graduate level, they promoted that. And as a result, I grew astronomically because we would be staying up late at night having these unbelievable conversations. Because, you know, one of my best friends at the time was Dan Katz, Jewish, founder of the Rainforest Alliance, and we just basically sparred back and forth where, you know, Dan, you have to understand what it was like for me as a black boy growing up in Alabama. Well, David, you have to understand what it was like for me as a Jewish kid growing up in Cincinnati. And as a result, you know, we just kind of grew into space. So we got to create more spaces on our campuses where we are promoting really substantive dialogue amongst our students.
I really appreciate all those answers. I think these are the kinds of questions that, particularly on how colleges can get back to sort of the educational values, and that are going to be really important as we go on. And honestly, I'd love to talk about this for the whole rest of the panel later, but we've got some other agenda items to talk about too. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit and kind of take that on. But I hope we all can sort of think a little bit about some of these responses. And I know they're going to help me shape my thinking a little bit too. You know, when I looked at the reports, these few reports, particularly the ones about the most recent one, I was really struck by how much emotional stress, mental health issues were affecting students. They're the most important reason that students leave school, and they're one of the top reasons that students don't enroll in the first place. It's particularly true for women, and it's particularly true for people under 35. I'm tempted to just ask you what's going on here, but what I really want to know is, like, when you think about how to respond to some of these things, I'm sure you're all aware of some of these issues yourselves on campuses, what do you take into consideration in forming your responses? How do you think about these problems, and then, like, what do you do to address them? But, like, really, what goes into the process?
I'll just step back and say at a macro level, the University of Tennessee is a state land-grant R1 university. We have 36,000 students. We had 59,000 applications for next fall's freshman class. Now it seems like the whole country wants to come to Tennessee, and Tennessee kids still want to come there too, so that's a whole nother issue. But one of the things that we have developed at Tennessee is, and I'm borrowing from my colleague Amber Williams, who's here, she's responsible for everything I'm getting ready to talk about in the blue jacket over there. We have taken, rather than a deficit mindset, we've really taken more of what I think of as an abundance mindset. And that really, I think, does play into this at a macro level. For example, all of our students take Clifton Strengths Finder. They all can tell you their top 5 strengths. I go out on campus all the time, and sometimes I'll have a gift card and I'll say, you're going to get $5 worth of cookies if you can tell me your top 5 strengths. If they only know 4, they don't get the card. But each of them has a student success team appointed, assigned to them. And that team consists of 4 people. An academic advisor, who is, we all know what an academic advisor, but the difference is you don't have to go hunt and find one. You have one assigned to you. Number 2 is a strengths coach, an academic strengths coach. This person knows the young people, the people they've been assigned, knows their strengths, and can say, okay, how are you going to use strategic and achiever and blah, blah, blah to choose your major? or to be successful. The third one is somebody from, we call it One Stop. It's where people are cross-trained in registrar, financial aid, scholarships, all that. And the fourth one is a peer mentor. Now you might say, what do those have to do with mental health? It sets the stage from day one as, guess what? You're somebody who belongs here, who has a lot of strengths. We're going to help you leverage them. And one of the big reasons we know kids drop out is something dumb like too many parking tickets or a bill they don't understand. And so we're going to help them with that proactively. And the other thing I would say is that the peer mentor is somebody who helps with the feeling like you belong. We know the top 2 reasons people drop out of Tennessee is they don't find a community and they don't have the confidence to succeed. So that's just sort of a start. Like as you begin at Tennessee, we're going to start in the positive space, and then I'll let my colleagues talk about other things y'all are doing.
Just why that approach? So like, what is it about your student body, or what we should, just
So
something that will help people understand how
It
to
was
get there.
about retention. Our retention rates had been down in the low 80s to mid 80s. This year we are at 91.1%, and we've made that progress in 3 years. So that was the starting point.
Chancellor King? I don't necessarily need to go down the row each time, but it's working, so let's do it.
You know, I love what Tennessee is doing, and I think one thing I draw out from that is the focus on wellness, overall student wellness. We've had great luck at SUNY in the last 2 years of getting significant new state dollars, and we were able to invest last year $10 million across our 4-year institutions in expanding mental health services. And one of the dilemmas I noticed for our institutions was, do you just hire more counselors? Or do you also make investments in a broader wellness strategy? And a tension there, because the demand for counselors is extraordinary.
And probably something you can't meet.
Exactly, exactly. And so campuses also needed to think about, how do we foster a culture of wellness? How do we help students feel connected to peers and to adult or mentor on campus? How do we make sure that students are taking care of their physical health and well-being? How do we make those resources available? So I like what Tennessee is doing. We are trying to do something similar across our 64 campuses of moving towards a wellness frame, even as we invest in additional counselors. A second issue I draw out is a real challenge we have as a sector and as a country in the mental health field is we do not have enough diverse mental health providers. And the evidence is just overwhelming of the difference it makes for diverse students to see a diversity of folks who are available to them for mental health supports. And we just have to get a lot better at that, and I'm counting on not only our work at SUNY, but partners like David to make sure that we have that future diverse workforce in the mental health field. The last thing I'd mention is, I do think sometimes mental health can be a proxy for other challenges that students are grappling with. And one of the first things I did when I became chancellor last January, I visited all 64 of our campuses, and I spent time with students on every campus. And we have, small rural community colleges all the way through to urban research universities with 30,000 students, the full range. But mental health came up everywhere. In many cases, the mental health issues were also intersecting with food insecurity, housing insecurity, the stress of a parent who can't find reliable childcare and is trying to juggle that with pursuing their education. And so I think we have to look behind those numbers to also think about, how do we just support our student well-being generally?
President Wilson?
Yeah. So one thing that the survey got spot on was what we're seeing at Morgan is cost and mental health. Those are two incredible areas. And so in the mental health space, I'm concluding my 14th year as president at Morgan, and I have not seen in the first 12 years what I'm seeing in the last 2 years in terms of the elevation of mental and psychological issues amongst students on campus. It is the likes of which I have never seen. And so during the pandemic, and all of us went virtual, I had never taken an online class. And I wanted to know how my students were experiencing that loneliness, how they were experiencing being detached from the community. And so I actually registered for 2 online classes, and I received quite an education.
Yeah. Did you register under your own name?
And so that was the beginning for me of understanding isolation and what that was really meaning for our students. And I wanted to understand as well how the faculty were adjusting to now offering courses online when they had never, ever done it before. So that was one data point for me, was kind of understanding what was going on with the students. So then we started having discussions about ensuring that as the campus was closed now for a year, that we may be losing some aspects of our rights, RITES, rituals, ceremonies, the culture of the campus, the belongingness of the campus. And so I put in place a committee on resocialization, reacculturation, so that as we begin to bring the students and the community back, how do we bring them back now? Understanding they've been isolated, understanding they're bringing back these issues. And so that led to a couple of things. Number one, we actually started offering courses at Morgan in mindfulness. And the minute we opened the course, it filled, like within 24 hours, it was filled, and then we had to go and open another section. And so we're still offering now courses in mindfulness. And then what we heard from the students, I have a town hall, an open town hall meeting every semester, and the students come, and the university community come, and they just said, you know, we need a break. President Wilson, we need a break. And we ideated with the faculty, what does a break look like? And we learned they need a break too. And so we rethought our academic calendar, and basically now we program into the academic calendar wellness days, where professors don't give assignments, and the students just have a day, if you will, to reset. And so we're trying to respond to this in a multitude of ways. Yes, we've hired more counselors. We have brought on 24/7 counseling services, but we also are trying to really attack this at the level of...
I can hear skeptics of higher education sitting here thinking, oh my God, these kids today, and I hate this phrase, these kids today, but let's say students today, they need wellness days, they're under so much stress, all they're doing is going to school. How do you, I mean, clearly they're not all just going to school, they're working, they're juggling families, they're doing a lot of other things, but I guess I'm wondering, it's like, again, back to sort of perceptions of higher education and how people see this, how do you think that plays?
Nothing makes me more frustrated than attributions about college students that aren't true. And that's a narrative we hear a lot. I want to tell you what I see that I think plays into this. I see a lot of students who are they have no problem coming right up to me or other leaders and saying, we need more mental health services. I couldn't see a counselor. The line was too long. They said it'd take 2 months. I'm so impressed by that chutzpah to do that. I do office hours once a month. I'm somewhere where anyone can come in and talk to me. And a young man walked in and he had a hard time making eye contact. He said, I'm autistic. And I'm starting a club for autistic students. And we need rooms on campus that have sensory furniture in there and devices. I was so impressed with that. So while mental health is an issue, and we all are, you know, you can't counsel your way out of it, you're absolutely right. I also have a lot of faith in these students. The number one strength of our students the last 3 years in a row is restorative. They want to fix things. They want to solve problems. And they're self-starters, an awful lot of them. So while I just want to counter the narrative that's out there about entitled students and, you know, they've been handheld. And I know there's some of that that's true, but in general, I see a different type of student that we're also not prepared for. Like, they want to take charge and start a student organization for autistic students.
Yeah, the power of self-advocacy. It may be that these were always issues, but students really didn't know how to express it as much before. But I do wonder, it's also out there it's an issue for students who are not enrolling also. So it's not just a student issue. I think maybe society itself is just putting a lot more demands on people. One of the things in the survey that struck me, not so much in the State of Higher Education report, but one of the earlier ones talked a little bit about Stephanie raised it today, 42% of adults without a degree see higher ed credentials as being more important now than they were 20 years ago. Leaving aside that still leaves 58% who don't see that. Some people believe higher education is important, yet they're still not enrolling. So I'm going to start with President Wilson with this question. What do you think about the power of all the counter-narratives out there? And not just the counter-narratives, but the actual real trends. I think we're seeing a bigger push in society for skills-based hiring, for people who don't necessarily need a degree to get hired for certain jobs. I think we're seeing some political reaction to higher education among some parties. We're seeing really just a broader focus on credentials in general. In the market, credentials were one of the more popular options for students considering post-secondary education right now. So how does that play into what colleges are having to face right now? I'm also thinking with the enrollment cliff in the background.
So I was very, very encouraged by the results of the survey, as I have said earlier, because I came away thinking the following. Americans are not being hoodwinked. They understand all too well that the path to a more prosperous life is a credential beyond post-secondary. And those numbers were very strong. I was really, really impressed with how individuals were thinking about the baccalaureate degree. 75% of Americans. And then 80% said, oh, don't stop there. Go on and get a graduate degree. And so this is a powerful narrative because it is countering this other narrative that is trying to play out over here, which says, oh, but the majority of the country is not thinking that college is worth it. We got to get out in front of that. And we have to really take these data and basically now get on the platform and say, in essence, this is not true. Now, all of the reasons why they were about prosperity. They were about economic prosperity for them individually, right? But they understand that the bachelor's degree, for the most part, if they get that degree, this is what this is going to mean for me and my children and my grandchildren in terms of the amount of income that they are going to make over their lifetime versus my son, daughter, or niece or nephew who stopped at the high school diploma. And so I'm very, very encouraged by that. And I think there's an opportunity here for higher ed across the country to begin to take these results and counter the narrative out there of perhaps not going to get that post-secondary credential.
But if we look at how people are voting with their feet, with their dollars, with their, enrollments are falling. They were falling before nationally. Some of your institutions may have individually some different stories, but nationally they were falling before the pandemic. They bounced back a little bit since the pandemic, but that's after another huge dip. And they're still low. I mean, they're historically lower than they've been in the last 10 or 20 years.
I think part of what we need to do is respond to the demand. People are saying they want to know that their post-secondary experience is going to translate into economic benefit. If we're honest, not all of our institutions across the higher ed sector deliver on that promise. And so I think for us at SUNY, some of the things we're thinking about are folks want to be able to come sometimes and get a short-term credential that translates into an immediate impact at the job or into a job. And so we have over 500 micro-credentials that we've launched, and we're doing it in a way that connects them to credit-bearing experiences so that students understand if I go get this micro-credential, it can be stackable ultimately into an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree. And we persuaded the governor and the state legislature to allow the state tuition assistance program to apply to part-time non-credit workforce development programs if they can be converted into credits for a degree program.
That's huge, isn't it? I mean,
huge. Huge. We're very excited about that. Second, we're trying to think creatively about scheduling. That came up in some of the report as well. You know, shorter quarter terms so that students can see that they're making progress more quickly. Course hours that aren't just in the sort of 10 to 3, but making it possible for folks to more easily take classes at work. Thinking about classes not just in terms of online or in the classroom, but hybrid models. If childcare falls through, but you still want to see at class and be a part of class, can you Zoom into class that day? You know, those things are very important, I think, to responding to people's needs. The other thing we're doing is we have an ambition to ensure that every SUNY student, every one of our undergraduates, has an internship experience. And I think that's crucial to protecting the humanities and the social sciences, because students need to know, and their parents, in the case of the 18-year-olds, need to know that if a student chooses a degree program that doesn't exactly translate to a job, we still care if they get a job at the end. You know, I have an older daughter who is studying drama. I am very excited about her career as a film actress. It's going to be amazing. But one thing is for sure, she's going to work, and she will not be coming back to stay in our basement, right? That is a threshold agreement that we have, right? And I think a lot of parents are thinking about that and wondering, is this degree going to help my kid go out in the world and be successful? And we have to be more responsive to that.
And you know what? Drama is a great major. The recent president of AT&T in Tennessee, she was just speaking in a class I'm teaching. She majored in drama, and she can give you hook, line, and sinker all the ways in which you need to be able to act to be successful in business. So that's a great idea. I want to just add to that.
I'm team drama too, by the way, 100%.
First of all, to Lumina and Gallup, the headline is just what he was saying of your study. I'm so excited by that, because we, the three of us, face the narrative constantly that the quality and value of higher education's gone down. That's the headline, so just please don't bury it. It's tremendous. And I would say, I want to just piggyback on what my colleagues were saying here. In Tennessee, one of the things we are working on is how we package together degrees that look different than what we've done in the past. So we're doing two big major things. One is we just announced a partnership with Arizona State University, that we are collaborating together in online degree programs, digital learning. We have almost 1 million people in Tennessee with some degree credit, but no degrees. And so we are going after them, but in partnership with another school who's already done it well, high quality, and we're not gonna repeat. They're letting us use some of their courses to do this. They've helped train us. We've got a team that's been working with their team. It's very unusual for big public schools to collaborate rather than compete. So I'm excited about that. We're going to start those classes, rolling them out in the fall. The second thing we've done is we've established recently a college of emergent and collaborative studies. Too long of a name. We call it CEC for short. Which means no faculty are in that college, but this group of administrators goes around and finds on campus blocks of curriculum that a student can package together for a degree based on what industry is telling us. So for example, industry will say to me, when I ask them a question, would you hire a student who has 12 hours in business analytics, 12 hours in moral dilemmas of the 21st century, 12 hours in persuasion and communication? They go, absolutely. And so, but the problem in higher ed is all three of those things exist in different colleges. So we produce degrees based on how we're organized as opposed to what industry needs. So much like what you're doing, the same kind of thing. And I think we have to do more of that and help faculty see that that's okay. We can still write the greatest novel in the English department, but at the same time help an English student figure out how to get a job, just like your daughter's going to get a great one after she's a famous actress, I'm sure of it.
And also a couple of quick points as well. So this is just terrific, and so we too have engaged in curricular realignment, and we are paying a lot of attention to the work of the future and the future of work, and have brought into existence a suite of new academic degree programs to reflect that. We're the only university in Maryland offering, for example, a BS degree in cloud computing, a BS degree in embedded systems, a BS degree in data science. So we have identified these workforce demand type degrees, and mechatronics engineering, the only university in the state offering that, and it's one of the fastest growing programs. And so that's one thing that we are doing that's very, very concrete. But the other is that we are paying a lot of attention to certificates. And while we have certificates all over the place at Morgan, it's not organized. It's not done in a way where we do not want to dissuade students who want to be a philosopher from becoming a philosopher, who really want to be an English major from becoming an English major. But we understand as well, as you've indicated, Blondie, that employers are saying, well, so what types of other skills, other than probity and critical thinking, will this graduate bring? So we are now bringing into existence a certificate center with a high degree of intentionality that we're going to be offering, who knows, hundreds of certificates to students. And we are going to embed those certificates in their path toward the undergraduate degree. This would not be additive. It would be a path toward that. And the student who is getting the degree in history could very well then get a certificate along the way in cybersecurity, or a certificate in another area. But it's a way of listening to what the employers are saying, and at the same time understanding that a college degree should be designed in a way that is not exclusively about the job. It's also about creating better citizens. It's also about critical thinking, but you also want those graduates also to have a credential that employers will also respect.
I'm really struck by this certificate thing. I was actually had a specific question to ask you about whether higher ed in general should be doing more to sort of capitalize on the interest in certificates right now. All of you have already jumped the gun on that and are already doing it, which is kind of cool. Maybe this is a better question for the next panel, but are there obstacles besides the financial ones? I mean, if you can get financial aid to cover it, that's one thing. Are there obstacles institutionally to get this happening on your campuses? Is there resistance from faculty members? They don't want to teach certificate courses because they're professors?
No, not at Morgan, no. It really requires our being in partnership with the faculty. We have a very traditional university, and so we have to really spend a lot of time making sure that the faculty is understanding that what we're doing is not in any way subordinate, to their view of what a college experience and a degree is designed to do. But no, I need to knock on all kinds of wood and everything else, but no kind of major resistance from faculty.
I just observe a tension we see in our community colleges. We have 30 community colleges, and some of them in their history sort of evolved as mostly a transfer college. And so the sort of the cultural identity of the campus and the orientation of many of the faculty members is to see themselves as a junior college preparing students for four-year institutions. And there is some tension between that and workforce development programs where the associate's degree will be the end goal for students, or shorter-term certificate or micro-credential programs. And we are working to try to get folks to see that those don't have to be in tension with each other, that if we can get students to campus for those shorter-term programs, they can become our degree programs, and they may decide to come back for a bachelor's degree later, not necessarily immediately after they finish the associates, but down the road as part of their professional journey.
One last thing I would add, this is coming from the business side of the house, but we've recently changed the way we allocate the budget to something many schools have been doing for a long time called RCM, so that units can function more like a business, and there's an incentive for growing and trying to create credit hours outside of just the degree program, maybe as you now offer it. And so we're already seeing deans getting real creative and interested in how to think about attracting students into all sorts of programs. I'm hoping that will help with incentivizing faculty to teach in programs that might not necessarily be the same thing, the same delivery they've always been doing. So I think that can help, hopefully.
As a former business reporter at the Chronicle, I'm very excited to hear about a geeky idea like responsibility center management actually translating into something that could benefit students. That's cool. Costs was actually a big issue that's raised in this survey. Students, higher ed has not gotten less expensive to go to. And I guess I'm wondering, are there other business models or other approaches that schools could be thinking about right now to make it easier for students to afford college? You talk about the students starting college and taking a break between associates and bachelor's degree. Are there different models where students could, change the calendar, change the, make more relationships with companies to pay tuition? Where are some of those approaches going forward that could sort of help make the actual cost of college less expensive? Because I don't think we can continually to rely on the federal student aid system, and state aid systems can only go so far.
I hope someone has a magic answer for that.
Maybe someone in the audience.
I will say a couple things. What we've tried to do in Tennessee is we benefited from the fact that we still get about 30% of our budget from the state, which is high for a public. And so we're very grateful for that. But at the same time, the expense has gone up over the years. And so we've targeted our aid programs towards low-income high schools. Like, for example, we have 33 of them in the state of Tennessee that we've identified that if the student graduates from there and is admitted to the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, their tuition fees are paid for. Having said that, the rest of the cost is still expensive. And so, we are trying to work on that, address that. That part for us comes more from donors with scholarships. But it's a struggle, and we've been creative about, we have something called University of Tennessee Promise, which means if you, the household income is $75,000 now, and anyone from a household with less than that gets free tuition and fees. But again, it doesn't address the total cost. So we still struggle.
I mean, I guess I'm thinking a little bit about scheduling too, because if someone has to work, it would be better if you could communicate to them that you have a schedule that kind of accommodate a working person.
And we also pay close attention to costs at the university. So there are two public universities in Maryland that are not members of the system, the university system, and Morgan is one of them. So I have my own board of regents. And the Board of Regents, during my tenure there, they have been very, very concerned about costs. And how do we make sure that we're not pricing a college degree out of reach for the students that we serve? So over the last 5 years, we have only increased tuition one time by 2%. And we are the second lowest public university in Maryland with regard to tuition. It's still under $10,000 a year. And that's still, housing and other fees, totally different, right? But 30% of my students are first gens, and we are never going to vacate that particular mission at Morgan. It's not in our DNA to all of a sudden want to become one of the highest rejecting institutions. That's not the way we are defining academic quality. It's not the way we are defining how to make sure that a greater swath of the population is making its way into the American middle class. And so with that in mind, we also then reinvest in financial aid about 25 to 26% of the tuition that we actually take in the form of institutional aid. And that is almost twice as much as we've received from the Pell Grant. So we do pay a lot of attention to cost, and we try and make sure that we are not raising the tuition every year to price it out of the reach of students. And then last, we have a partnership across the state with about 2-year institutions. We identified about 13 majors at the university that are under-enrolled, everything from engineering, physics, to some of the liberal arts. And they could have more majors without our having to hire more professors. And so we created a partnership with all of the community colleges in the state called the TIP program, the Transfer Incentive Program, where we said to them, okay, look, if students want to come to Morgan and get a BS degree in engineering physics or get a BS degree in any of these other 13, 12 programs, they could stay on your campus. They need to stay at the community college. They need to get the associate degree. And then they would transfer into one of these programs without having to repeat any of those courses, and therefore they would shave off 2 years of costs. And then we would give them $2,000 per semester in a scholarship up to 5 semesters or $10,000 to complete the last 2 years. And so we are looking at a number of creative ways in which we can meet students where they are and help them to taste the magic of a college degree at the baccalaureate level.
Great. I've got a ton more questions, but I know a lot of you are in the room. I don't know if there's a way to do these questions from afar, but we're going to have a handheld mic that's going to come around in a second. If anybody has questions for this panel, I've been very impressed by the candid nature of these responses, so I'm hoping that will continue for your questions. I see one right in the corner over there. Maybe just say your name real quickly and just, again, ask if you can keep it to a question, not one of those comments, not quite a question, questions.
Hi, hello, all right. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for being here and the panelists. I have a question. You all agree that cost is one of the biggest barriers for students. Now, I'm now working graduate enrollment, and we're still seeing a gap with students graduating without hands-on experience, right? Which is a big reason why our graduate program, and we're promoting that because we are exposing them in the curriculum to hands-on experience. Now, you all also mentioned that you are adding that and you see internships being really important in the universities, but we also know the gap of income and inequality with income. So what are you doing with your industry partners at your institutions, guaranteeing that these internships are paid for our students? Because that's probably one of the biggest reasons why they're not getting that hands-on experience in their undergraduate years. Thank you.
You're exactly right. So in our community colleges, one thing we're doing with our Department of Labor is trying to grow the number of apprenticeship programs that we have where students can work and learn while working so that they can get their degree and move up at their job. And those are very promising. We've also launched a set of pre-apprenticeship programs. At our 4-year institutions, last year, because of the state support that we've got, we were able to put $10 million towards expanding paid internships across the SUNY system. Because my worry is there are students who, they really want to do that internship, but they need to make money. And so they're working at Chipotle instead of getting the internship experience, and their more affluent peer is getting that internship experience and now is going to be ahead of them in getting a job. So that investment in paid internships is really important. We were actually able, because of increased state funding this year, to supplement that funding. So we're going to keep growing that pool of funding to support paid internships. But because we're in DC, I can't miss the chance, as we're talking about costs, to point out that in 1980, the federal Pell Grant program covered 80% of the costs of public higher ed. Today, it's under 30%. We should double the Pell Grant as a country. In New York, we just made changes to our state financial aid system to adjust our income thresholds for the family income. It had been $80,000 since the year 2000. The max family income, we just moved that to $125,000. We just doubled the minimum award from $500 to $1,000 in state financial assistance. So that's more than 44,000 SUNY students who are going to get more financial aid from the state next year than they did this year. So there are lots of things we can all do as institutions to tackle affordability, but we also need these federal and state governments to step up and invest in our students.
It occurs to me, I have 3 public college leaders here. And back to the internship question, do any of your states have programs where college students can connect specifically with the state agencies and get internships directly in the state? That seems like some symbiosis there.
Yeah, we just launched a Climate Core internship program with all of our state agencies that do work in the climate space as an opportunity. Also, the governor included in this year's budget a new Empire State Service Corps, where we'll have, modeled on AmeriCorps, where students will be able to participate in public service paid by the state as part of their college experience. So we're excited about that too.
And I know California has something similar, but it just strikes me, it's like you're part of the state government, so you are right there in the mix.
And the answer from us is yes. We do have that partnership, not only with the state, with regard to state agencies, but also with the state legislature. And we take that same concern to both of those places to say you have to also consider paid internships for students, and that is indeed the case. We actually are entering into a partnership with the city of San Francisco that we're going to start this summer.
It's a long commute.
Yeah, so they have been ideating on, quote unquote, an HBCU in California, and they have settled on, I believe, about 4 or 5 institutions where, had a conversation with the mayor there and said, I don't think this model that you're thinking about is sustainable, but if you created a common space and you invited 4 or 5 institutions into the space to offer different kinds of pathways to degrees, it might work. And so they're doing that. But, and so we have already had 6 students to be selected. They are going to also have an internship with one of the city agencies in San Francisco that actually is going to be quite commanding in terms of what they are going to be paid. But everything is lining up in terms of the experience, the paid internship, and also giving those students an opportunity to see another part of the United States.
We know that students who are highly engaged stay in school, so we strongly urge them to do a paid internship, to study abroad, to do a research project with a faculty member. All of those serve the same purpose of getting involved, getting engaged. Not a fan of unpaid internships. Not a good thing.
Great. We have a question over there.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for being here. I'm Karan Martinez from American University, and I have a question about pipeline and the enrollment cliff and the future. America is facing a literacy crisis. 54% of US adults have a literacy rate below a 6th grade level. The average American reads at the 7th to 8th grade level. We are 125th in literacy among all countries in the world. 1 in 4 children in the US grow up without ever learning how to read. President Wilson, you talked about the goal to make people's way into the middle class. What role does higher education and all of us have to improve this situation?
We, of course, have a major role to play because if we don't look back and understand what's going on in the K-12 space, then many more of our institutions will be in peril. And so, yes, just out of pure self-interest, we have to pay a lot of attention to what we are seeing taking place in that space, and then we have to create these kind of unique partnerships very early on to make sure that we are bringing our expertise to address some of these challenges that we're seeing. In this space at Morgan, we kind of looked at this and said, we have all these existing partnerships already with K-12, but how do we bring them together in a way where we can better understand the challenges? And basically, I had this discussion with my dean of the School of Education and Urban Studies, and she came forward with the concept of a national center on the elimination of educational disparities. And you may have read about the $40 million gift that we got a couple of years or so ago from Mackenzie Scott. I then actually just took $500,000 of that and then went to the governor of Maryland and said, look, we have this concept of this national center to eliminate educational disparities. And if I brought $500,000 to the table, would you be open to funding this center in perpetuity? And so that's what happened. And so we're getting, I think, $3.7 million a year to stand up this national center to eliminate educational disparities, where we're going to be looking at those issues, and we're going to be pumping out the kind of research where K through 12 teachers and parents and communities would know what to do with on Monday morning in order to hopefully address the challenges to literacy that you outlined.
And just to build on that quickly, we know that part of the reading challenge we face as a country is that we haven't been doing a very good job of teaching reading in recent decades. We've been ignoring the science of reading, which makes clear that students need to learn decoding skills. They also need background knowledge and vocabulary building. And we have great science on that, but we haven't been using that to drive what happens in classrooms. And so in New York, we're trying to move as a state towards being a science of reading state. And at SUNY New Paltz, we have a micro-credential program for current teachers to come back and get really a deep appreciation for the science of reading. And we just launched that about a year ago, and we've had now over 5,000 teachers who have or are participating in that micro-credential program, and we're going to continue to grow that. We just got funding in the state budget to do that.
Ditto what he said. The 1 in 4 students, they're being taught by a graduate of some university. And so it's exactly what you said. And we've doubled down on the science of teaching. This is where it has to, it's partly our responsibility. And so I'm glad you brought that up. We're doing something similar in Tennessee.
Go ahead.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us. I'm Frank Ballman with the National Association of State Student Grant and Aid Programs. I'm actually an employee of HESC in New York State, so the people who run the tuition assistance program. By training, I always think student financial aid is the number one reason students drop out. So I was stunned by the data at the beginning that suggests it's really more about mental health. And I know as someone who was very reluctant, but as a college senior, I finally realized I need to get some help with something, and I didn't tell my friends and roommates, but it's an important thing. I'm wondering if there's a way to make it almost like part of the curriculum. As an example, like I had to go see an academic counselor every year to ensure that the courses I'd taken kept me on track to graduate. Is there a way to build a mental health check into the, I don't want to say the curriculum?
It feels like students are much more aware of the availability of this on campuses now than they used to be, right?
Yeah, they're asking for more. It's a very interesting idea. We do a first-year studies class for all freshmen where all the stuff I was talking about, a lot of it takes place there. That would be an obvious check-in point for that as well. I think we're open to any suggestion that's creative, and that's a good one.
Hello, my name is Philip Wilkerson from George Mason University in Fairfax, Virginia. I work at Career Services, but my question is more so about identity, DEI. We've seen a lot of movements in certain states, anti-woke movements, where they're cutting DEI programs or eliminating those from the university. And as you can see, a black male, it's very concerning to see those things happening state level. And so how do you navigate these topics with your policymakers, but also show that this is a human issue, and as well as, the return on investment of investing in DEI will help our students thrive, making sure that, it's not just targeting students, it's helping all students equitably.
And I'll add that the survey noted that for that sense of belonging was much more difficult for women and for students of color on campuses. So that's obviously something that was found in the data as well. Why don't we address this?
It's a hugely important issue. I'm glad you raised it. What I say is in New York, we're going to be the opposite of those states that are sliding backwards. So we have adopted a diversity, equity, and inclusion academic course requirement for all undergraduates at SUNY. So every undergraduate over the course of their time will have that exposure. And we do that in part because DEI isn't for some students, isn't for Black students or Latino students, it's for all students because they're all going to live in a diverse society. If you're going to become a nurse, you ought to learn about the racial and maternal health disparities that we have as a country, which are outrageous. If you're going to become a welder, you ought to be prepared to work with people who are different from you and have different values, right? And so we're doing that across all of our classes, all of our programs, and we have faculty members who are our diversity fellows who are supporting their colleagues and thinking through how to build that content into every academic program. We also are committed to diversifying our faculty, which I think is a huge challenge for the higher ed sector. We have to work to make sure that we build those pipelines into faculty roles, and part of that is financial, a lot of it is mentoring, a huge part of it is intentionality about identifying folks who are future faculty members. We have a program where we recruit diverse postdocs, and they are essentially guaranteed a faculty tenure track position at the end of a successful 2-year postdoc experience, because we have got to make sure that our students see themselves represented in the faculty of our campuses.
We'd have to wrap up quickly here, but
okay. And like John, we're not confronting that issue in Maryland, obviously. But I make it known to the university community that DEI is the foundation upon which Morgan State University came into existence. And so when those principles are basically undergirding why you have been around for 157 years, under no circumstances will we ever vacate them. However, what we are seeing in some of those other states that have enacted laws is now we're getting students from basically 50 states, right? We just had an open house, and I'm not going to name the states, but we kind of go around, and we had like 100 students from a state where we perhaps even today only have about 5 or 6 students on the campus from. So that will have some kind of impact long term. And one of the things that I really want to say about the survey, which I was really pleased to see, was that you had a couple of questions on there this time around about guns and then maternal health. I would hope that this question would be on the future survey as this issue now takes root a bit more, and to see exactly how students are looking at this in terms of their own college-going decisions.
I'm from one of those states who has had 2 divisive concepts bills. Basically, those bills were focused on you can't indoctrinate students into believing certain things, and we feel like we've never done that as a faculty. But that we had that bill. What we did at the same time, we were looking inside the whole University of Tennessee system at the progress we have made in attracting more Black and brown students, retaining them better. And the truth was, we have not done a very good job. So in spite of a lot of diversity offices, we hadn't moved the needle in that regard. So what we've done is, we're a land-grant university. So we sort of took a step back and said, you know, what is the basic mission of the land grant? It is access and it's engagement. And so we, like for example, our campus DEI office is now called the Office of Campus and Access and Engagement, and they are taking on some new and broader responsibilities, like these 33 high schools that I mentioned earlier. They're now going to be working in those low-income high schools and the junior highs that feed them, or the middle schools. So we've broadened the responsibilities, but not abandoned the mission of trying to grow so that the campus looks more like the world that we live in.
So with that, I think it's striking to note that we've sort of circled back to where we started this conversation, doubling down on the mission and the educational values of the role of colleges and the role of higher education, which I think is probably a great way to end this conversation. Please join me in thanking these terrific college leaders.
Thank you, Goldie. Thank you to our amazing panelists. And I'd love to welcome our second panel of experts to the stage, if they'll join me. We have joining us in this next conversation, James Gavall, Undersecretary for the Department of Education, President Madeline Pumariega from the Miami-Dade College, and Aaron Thompson, who's President of Kentucky Council of Higher Education. And this next session will be moderated by Nick Anderson, who you might recall was, you were following probably some of his great reporting from the Washington Post when he was reporting there, and now he's with the American Council of Education. So welcome to our second panel.
Good morning. Well, that was a fantastic first panel, and I'm a policy geek myself, and so our second panel here about policy is a delight for me to help moderate, and I was actually thrilled to see that the first panel was getting in the weeds on policy too. So we're gonna get wonky here, and I know you're ready for it. And the cool thing about our panel here is that we have three expert perspectives from different vantage points in higher ed. We're lucky to have a senior representative from the U.S. Education Department. We're lucky to have a state leader in public higher education in Kentucky. And we're lucky to have a college leader of a very interesting 2- and 4-year institution in Miami. And so, as you're thinking about the kind of questions you want to ask, just bear in mind that they can kind of look at these things from different angles and help us find some ways of thinking about these problems. One thing I took away from the data is, frankly, a sign of hope, because we've been in a bit of a rut of a narrative about the declining public confidence in higher education. And I'd like to kind of find ways to push back against that narrative and push back against the notion of declining confidence. And these findings, to me, offer some possibility for that. One of the top ones that is highlighted for us is that there's been a growth in the percentage of unenrolled students who are considering enrolling in post-secondary education. It's up to 59%, and that had been 44% a couple years ago. That's potential. That's real potential there. And then in the data, we also see potential obstacles, right? We see barriers, cost, questions of cost, questions of access, questions about, is this relevant to career and how can it be relevant to career? Even questions about caregiving, right? Which were poignant to me, like the difficulty that caregiving students or potential students encounter, and whether that can be really a breaking point for them in pursuing higher education. So those are some of the things I'd like to talk about, but I really want to take advantage at first here of our fortunate guest, James, because he's here from the Department of Education, and talk about the FAFSA situation, financial aid. We all know that the FAFSA has been in the news. There's been some difficulties in the rollout of the new FAFSA. The FAFSA is a cornerstone of the financial aid system. James, just to start, can you give us an update on the status of the rollout in this cycle of the FAFSA, and how we're doing at this point in getting through the backlog?
Yeah, so it's a big transition this year to the new FAFSA. It's not just a new form. It is new methodology, new terminology, fundamental redesign of our systems. And it's a big change for students and families and for colleges and college counselors as well. So it's something that we're all going through together. And obviously, the implementation has not gone as we would have liked. We're not where we wanted to be. And I know that has caused a lot of confusion and anxiety for students and families, and additional work for colleges and college advisors. I regret that. You know, the FAFSA is now up and running. Students have been able to apply since early January. We've received more than 8 million applications. Students who come to the website today will see their application processed and sent to schools in 1 to 3 days. We have completed reprocessing the known errors, and schools have accurate information to make financial aid offers. The vast majority of schools are making financial aid offers. Of course, schools operate on different calendars. So our focus now is to make sure that everyone who needs help paying for college fills out the FAFSA and gets the help that they need. We still have lower numbers than we did last year at this point. We've been closing the gap every week. We're now running about 16% lower. And we've really got to think of this as an all-hands-on-deck situation, and ask for help from colleges, universities, states, school districts, community groups, you know, and just get the word out to students. You know, if you were waiting to fill out the FAFSA because of the headlines, you wanted the dust to settle, you know, now's the time. Come fill out the form, we will process it, we will get it to the schools you're interested in quickly, and they'll be able to make an aid award to you.
Is the dust settling? Do we feel like the backlog is clear or close to clear?
I mean, there is no backlog in terms of FAFSA processing. We're turning around applications within 1 to 3 days.
That's great news. And I see that the administration announced a new completion investment this week, right? Do you want to explain that?
That's right. On Monday, the Secretary announced a new $50 million program to support FAFSA completion, and it's being administered by our partners at ECMC. And we want to make sure that if people have ideas about how to get information in the hands of students or parents or other contributors, you know, they have the resources to do that. And particularly reaching students who are potential first-time students, reaching students before the end of this school year and before the start of next school year. And our hope is really to enlist, you know, a really broad set of players in communities across the country.
And is that based on trying to find solutions for the current cycle, or is that thinking ahead to the next cycle?
Right, we're focused on getting FAFSA completion rates up this year in the 24-25 FAFSA, yeah.
Now, can you also sketch out for us your vision for the next cycle? Because that's coming up on us soon. And maybe take a step back and explain to us sort of what the goal is here with this new rollout, and where you hope to be 6 months from now, where we all hope to be 6 months from now, 9 months from now, a year from now.
Yeah, I mean, the goal here, I think, is the right one, and I think there's a lot of exciting potential here. This was grounded in bipartisan legislation that was passed by Congress. And, you know, I suspect everyone in the room has been through the FAFSA and knows that it had earned a reputation for being challenging to complete, unnecessarily cumbersome. We know from our data that there are probably about 1 million people enrolled in college who are eligible for a Pell Grant and have not filled out a FAFSA. Of course, no one knows how many people might be enrolled in college if they knew that this help was available to them. So simplifying the FAFSA, you know, has the benefit of hopefully, you know, saving 18 million bottles of Advil every year, but also making the Pell Grant and other forms of student aid more effective at helping students enroll in college and complete in college. And, you know, is very much a part of the President's agenda around doubling the Pell Grant, new state-federal partnerships on college affordability, student debt relief, and the other historic investments he's making in college affordability.
So I'd like now to turn to our colleagues here. Madeline, if you could talk to me a little bit about your perception of the role of FAFSA at Miami-Dade and any concerns you have about the state of the FAFSA situation right now. I'd love to hear about that too.
Thanks. Good morning, everyone. As anything, when something rolls out, there's hiccups, and without a doubt, there were hiccups on this one. I worry about really the students, the first-gen students. I don't think this has a major impact on the Ivy Leagues or someone who was already planning for college, for the students that were applying for early college in October. I think that what happens when these headlines happen, when CAP counselors get confused, is that who it really has an impact are those students who are not sure that they belong in college. They only, or their families read the headlines that you have to get in debt to go to college, that there really isn't an affordable path or that there isn't a Pell Grant. So we've worked at Miami-Dade College tirelessly in community centers, Overtown Youth Center, at our schools to work with parents, English, Spanish, Creole, to make sure that if they want to come to college, they can come to Miami-Dade College, and we'll have a program for them. And so, we expanded our Presidential Scholars Program, Rising Black Scholars Program, our American Dream Scholars Program, and then had the mayor of Miami-Dade County launch together with us a Future Ready program, which is a last dollar promise program. And we've really been saying you have to get that application in so we can see what program is here for you. But college is affordable for you, and it's what we've been doing, because the hiccups in the rollout are for the adults. Families really don't care. They're just like, how do I do this and how do I get this done? So for us to sit out and say, oh, it's a mess, we haven't. We've just said, we want you to do your application. And for me, the greater concern is the simple things like an electronic signature, getting those corrected, a parent filing it for the first time, not hitting that box that, that we all know and we get used to doing. For them, they don't, and miss those little parts, those little nuances that matter. So for us, being proactive out there, as the Undersecretary said, we see lower applications in FAFSA, and that concerns me from our college going rates, just because we have worked so hard around our college, especially open door institutions. It's easy when you select 10% of your applications, no problem, just go to 15%. But when you're open door, and we saw the kind of enrollment declines leading up to COVID and during COVID, the recovery effort for so many community colleges and open door colleges has been really monumental, and we don't want to see that slow down. In Miami-Dade County, 53% of high school seniors go to college. That is 10 points down from 10 years ago. And there's nothing that tells us in a knowledge and a skills economy that you don't need college. And this further feeds that narrative that college isn't for everyone. And so we're going to continue to work hard and work with the department, go after some of the additional resources to get more families and students in the pipeline to college.
Aaron, just curious about where Kentucky is seeing the FAFSA situation, and if you could take it a step further to sort of what the role is of this program, this application in the Kentucky higher ed system and how it's going.
Sure, and I should say I represent all the public institutions 2 and 4 year, but also license the private institutions, which we brought all of those folks together to address this issue, but we started addressing it years ago, actually. And I know the department's probably tired of hearing us talk about how bad this is. So I'm going to say we're a high poverty state. We're 16.5% of our population that are in poverty. We are a high low income state. All of these things matter when it comes to this FAFSA rollout, no doubt. We're down significantly by comparison to 2023, but I want to talk a little bit about possible solutions that I think all of us need to think about going forward. For an example, several years ago in 2018-19, even though we were a fairly high FAFSA fill-out state, we were still not getting people to go to college. And I'm a former university president before being ahead of the system. And I will tell you that when we looked at our students that had enrolled, a significant amount, about 25% of those students had not filled out a FAFSA and they were eligible for Pell Grants. So we started about 2018-19 building coalition with our campuses, with our Gear Up, thank you for Gear Up, with our financial aid folks, with our K-12 folks, and we started instituting a process of getting into the communities and helping parents and others start filling out the FAFSA. So even though we only have 47.8% of students going to college from high school after they graduate from high school, we wanted to increase that, obviously, but I did a statewide tour in 2018. We found out that there was a perception as much as a reality to college affordability. Many people felt like that they couldn't go, but we also found out many people didn't know how to go. They didn't know about the FAFSA. And so we created a situation where the folk in my shop worked with the K-12 advisors and counselors to help students to know as much as to fill out. So comes this year. We employed those folk fast in that regard. However, we are behind. We're hoping to catch up. Early indications are that we will, possibly in July. But the tough thing for us is that we have many of our students that will not even think about going, even before this, until late in the game. And these are the students that need this money the most. And so we're trying to address those in the beginning first. But the item that will affect us more than anything else is also, and we haven't talked a lot about this, is the value proposition. The impression that college isn't worth it, and many people will use this as an excuse as to double down on that. So we're also doubling down on the value proposition of the importance of college. But my argument is that we should have had more of these things in place. By the way, I appreciate the increase in Pell, and also we got an increase in our state aid based on Pell. But what I think we have to do is to start looking for policy and practical solutions. This has taught us a little bit of a lesson, and I think we need to be thinking about, instead of just saying, when you're going to fix it, is how do we employ ourselves in helping them to fix it, for one thing, but also how we can address the situation even next year.
Now, one of the policy solutions I've seen, including in New York State that just announced this recently, is something called universal FAFSA. And this has taken root in, I would say, about a dozen states, where the idea is FAFSA completion is a requirement almost, or an assumption for high school students, unless you opt out. And I just wondered if I could ask each of you what you think of those ideas, if it's something that's crossed your mind in Kentucky, or James, if this is something that people talk about in the department, and Madeline, if this is something that might help you in Miami.
I'll start by saying the last 6 years I've tried to get a bill passed to do that, and we haven't been successful, barely. I'd also like to see a bill, I'd like to connect this, but I'd love to see directed admissions. Every college, if we look at infinite campuses or whatever we're using in K-12, we'll see very little change between the beginning of the senior year and the end of the senior year. And since higher education now is mainly doing that K-12 year with their dual credit, my argument is let's connect all of these items together. We really want to increase college completion. So I probably will not go back to the table this year with asking for a new bill on FAFSA, but what we found out is all the data are showing that if you are put into you can opt out. I'd love to see an opt-out bill versus an opt-in bill. But if you apply and see that you have money, those students that are the most affected based on affordability will be the ones that will see themselves going toward this. So once again, I will hope that somebody comes along other than me this year to push for that. But if not, maybe there's other alternative solutions to get people to go. I would not bank purely on this. We see Louisiana pulling away from that. But we do see, though, if you have an opportunity to show students they can afford and that they are worthy of going, quote unquote, then they will go and they will add to the workforce.
And I want to add, I'm not a proponent of adding more high school requirements. And so how do we build, like, for example, we passed a financial literacy component. So we're working hard to get that part of the financial literacy objectives. So if a student to graduate high school has to have financial literacy competencies, how do we make sure that applying for college, planning for college, and FAFSA is one of those components in that course that they already have to complete in order to graduate from high school? So that's the way we've been working. Then there hasn't really been an appetite in the legislature to add more requirements to high school completion, but how do we build it in existing ones? To me, if you're taking an economic class, it ought to be part of it. So how do we work with superintendents and principals and teachers to add this as an activity as part of an objective for a course? And then that'll help us without it being a requirement for high school and getting into opt-in and opt-out, but really building it into the pathway.
Part of being a federal employee, I'm not supposed to comment on state legislation, even errands. But I would say that we need to pay really careful attention to make sure that the benefits we're designing are reaching the people that we intend to help. And you hear people from the administration talking about approving loan forgiveness for 4 million people. When we got there, we found that most people that we knew were eligible for loan forgiveness because we knew they had a permanent disability, they were receiving benefits from Social Security, or we knew they attended a school that closed, or for some other reason, they were still not getting loan forgiveness. And you would think, with benefits potentially of tens of thousands of dollars, they still were not able to navigate our bureaucracy. And so what we have been able to do is get people the benefits that they were already eligible for by simplifying those programs, making the applications automatic wherever possible. And it's changed millions of lives. I think similarly, we need to do what we can to make sure that people know that help paying for college when they enroll is available, and make it as easy as possible for them to access those benefits.
So one of the things that we've talked about here is the perception of cost and cost. Right? And I'd like to sort of drill down on this a little bit and ask it, are there ways that, that you see that we can address the perception problem so that students who are not enrolled aren't scared away by the headlines about college costing $100,000 a year or $50,000 a year, whatever the sticker price is that's sort of scaring people. I'm curious about ways that you can reach those students and whether there's policy solutions to the perception problem.
Yeah, I think American higher education is arguably the most important institution we have for raising living standards and lifting people out of poverty. So as a believer in higher education, I say the problem is not just a perception problem. The graduation rate of our institutions is about 62%. We've made tremendous progress on that over the last decade, which is a huge success story. But we still have a ways to go. The graduation rate for students of color is under 50%. And 1 in 3 people who take out a loan don't graduate. So I think we do have work to do to make sure that we are delivering on the promise that we're offering people. And it is, my suspicion that some of the challenges we have is that a lot of young people know someone, a cousin or a friend who went to college and took out a loan and didn't complete and regrets it. So I think we do have to follow through on the student success agenda, and which will affect perception. Yes, I think theory of democracy, theory of capitalism, that public attitudes reflect some undermining reality there. Now, I think we're in a tremendously exciting time, and there are examples across the country, including a couple on the preceding panel, of people really moving the needle. Whether you talk about that in terms of equity or you talk about that in terms of economic development, I think there's a real broad consensus on the types of investments we want to make in higher education to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to enroll and to graduate and to go on to a better life.
I would just add, I think the survey gives us hope. Because I think it's the value proposition. You can see in the survey that there are more folks interested in industry certifications and certifications, that's drawing them to higher education. So I think the work that institutions have done around stackable credentials, about making sure if you come in through a certificate program, it leads right into your associates. I think we also have to, figure out better and more effective ways of blending non-credit to credit. I tell our team all the time, no one wants to wake up in the morning and go, I want to take a non-credit course. No, they are interested in leveling up or upskilling, and they want to take this course, this class that they perceive. They don't know yet about credit and non-credit. So how do we look at, de-skilling syllabuses so that they do create that value, that proposition, and then demystifying the college application and college admissions process, right? Especially for first-gen families and for students in our low-income high schools, where we know that when we look at FAFSA, applications at the high schools in the urban core, they have much less, FAFSA application rates than those in the suburbs. Why? Because there's CAP counselors and others there, providing that guidance and direction, and there's not as many in some of our schools that need them the most. So, building out stronger advisement core, and we've done those partnerships. I think it's on us. We have to do more of that so that the cousin who had the bad experience or didn't feel like it was the best return on investment has 10 other stories about why it opened the door to opportunity. As the Undersecretary said, whatever you want to say about higher education, especially today, through and through, the data shows it is the path, the data-proven pathway for economic mobility in our country. And there is not one employer that's saying to us, I need someone that has less education. They're saying I need critical thinking, and that comes from foundational skills of education, higher education. And I need more skills, and that comes from really the modern curriculum that so many of our institutions are working and aligning with the skills for the future and the skills that we need today.
There's so much to this answer, but I will start off by saying, Courtney would appreciate this, use your data, but do it in a way that makes sense to reach the different people that may have the impression that college isn't worth it. First of all, that's your big question. The second one is whether or not I can afford it, which normally comes after whether or not college is worth it. We've done a lot of return on investment reports where we track every single student graduating from high school and what they were doing 8 years later, how much input they had, student loans, whether they got any other financial aid, and if they had a job, whether it was a certificate or a 4-year degree or whatever, and we can show a return on investment that's huge. That's one thing. We need to get that messaging out. We're down almost 30% in student loans in the last 5 years. That message needs to go out. But we also have to be able to be more transparent. We have a student right to know where we list every major in our state at every college that shows exactly the return on investment, what jobs you can get with it, even a sociology major, and exactly the kind of what you should borrow, should not borrow, other ways of doing it. That needs to be frontward facing. But all of that goes to that you're going to have different conversations with different constituency around this. It's not just the students that we're trying to get, but it's also the students in college. I've spent the last 30-something years doing research and writing about student success. And what we found out when people really drop out, we'd say financial in their second or third year, but really many see no longer a value for that. So we talk to our employers as an example, and our employers are telling us, well, you do a pretty good job training them technically, it's a workforce certificate or a 4-year degree, but they don't have those employability skills. So in Kentucky, we have what we call the graduate profile. We're putting in the 10 essential skills built into all of our programs. All of our community colleges and 4-year institutions are engaged, and that's around issues of cultural competence, critical thinking, problem solving, civic engagement, and democracy that's located in there. But we're also going to do a capstone for every single one of our seniors, because we found out that many seniors say, well, I got this degree, but don't know what to do with it. And we're employing also our business and industry folks on the front end to help us to build those out where students can see that they have an end to this. And I disagree with some of the narrative that our community and technical colleges or our workforce colleges. My argument is that all of our institutions are. And it should not any longer be about career versus college. It should be career, and college and K-12 are only interludes into that process. So for me, we have to create a quality argument here to sell. We have to use our data to let people know exactly what the costs are. We also are going to have to help our campuses, and I'm proud to say this, every single one of our campuses have a promise program. You come in Pell eligible, you're going to get it paid for somehow in the end. And we put more money into our campus-based programs than we get from federal or state aid, but that needs to go out there. I control tuition. We've had the lowest tuition in the last 6 years in the history of Kentucky. But when we went to the legislature, my last statement, there's so much to talk about on this one. We went to the legislature, and I didn't say you cut us for 13 straight years, give us more money. I went in and I showed the return on investment for exactly every state dollar they put in, they get $67 back from that student who stays in the state and work. And we got the largest budget ever this past year. The point being is that it's going to take a variety of inputs with using our data and our knowledge and helping others to use it with us to make that happen.
This is our policy wonk group, and I just think that is a place. In Florida, when I was chancellor of our Florida college system, we passed the the Student Affordability Act. And we haven't raised tuition in 10, 12 years in Florida, but if an institution was going to raise it, you need, the majority of the board. It just doesn't happen. And it was, we were continuing to just grow tuition on the backs of families. And so again, for over 10 years, there hasn't been a tuition increase in any college or university in Florida. And that same year, we also passed performance-based funding. We're going to look at the data, and for everyone that said, oh, then
Are you a fan of performance-based?
I am a fan of performance. What you don't measure, you don't know. You cannot be so afraid to measure your FTIC cohort. You ought to know, and then put some goals and metrics. It doesn't mean for open door institutions, we're going to start weeding out folks. If you got a Pell student to the finish line, we weighted that at a higher rate so that we could continue to incentivize Pell completion. So I think there are policies that don't have to be punitive. I think that when you see a piece of data and then you create a punitive policy around it, that doesn't help us advance our impact. But when you do take a piece of data and you say, how can we be better, and how do we leverage both federal, state, and local resources to perform better, I think everyone wins when we do that. And those were two things we did in Florida. And I think, while it was tough in those same years, we redesigned developmental education and pretty much took it out. We made it optional. Student had a choice. That was the path to nowhere. We didn't love it when CCA came out with the report and the data, but it was the right decision to make and build a co-requisite model, which, Tennessee, has done at scale. And so I think there are ways that in the past decade we've redesigned our institutions. We can build on that. That's going to increase access and affordability.
I want to take a case study question that's sort of drawn from the survey. I mentioned the caretaker problem and how like students who are caretakers, like they're more likely to not enroll because they've got those issues, right? Are there policy solutions that you that you are working on, or actual programs you have that you'd like to highlight that maybe tackle that problem? It's just it's an example of the way that we can potentially remove a barrier and get people enrolled.
For us, the collaboration's been with the chamber and the leadership of the community, because it's not just higher education. They have employees that can't get to work because they don't have reliable childcare, because we don't have access to high quality childcare, early learning programs that get you to kindergarten readiness and then help that third grade reading. So I think, obviously through philanthropy, through single stop and other ways is the way Miami-Dade College has done it, but we're really now part of every committee in our community addressing for affordable housing and access to high quality and consistent child care, because I think that's the greatest impact and threat to our local economy. It's how do people care for their children and still get to work and still get to school.
Aaron?
There's several pieces. One, I will start out by saying that when we speak of caretakers, it's just not of children. It's also, in Kentucky, we found out many of these students took care of parents and grandparents and other folk. So we have to approach this from a different viewpoint, right? And I tell people, we normally measure adult learners, for an example, age 25. Well, we see a lot of 21, 22-year-olds with children, with taking care of families, that we have to rethink what we're talking about in this area. Yes, we're engaging employers to be our part in this, to help pay for child care and all of that, but we also engage our Division of Health and Human Services, who worked with us after we did our basic needs report that Lumina helped pay for, thank you Lumina, that we found out that we could do certain things as put a connector on every one of our community college campuses to help these students who are eligible, and they spent millions of dollars a year work with us to help students say, these are the benefits you can have to get this done. So we took a very proactive role in trying to address, and I'll give you like 10 more examples if you like, and I won't because of time. But to us is that you're going to have to think about, it's not just opening up a way that people can be admitted. You're going to have to understand that they're going to need those wraparound supports that they're going to need, and not get stuck in developmental education. My first day on the job, I made us a test optional state in admissions. Second day, I got rid of every developmental ed course in the state and said you can have people that fall in that line, but you're giving them wraparound services. You have to, and they did. So those wraparound services have to be culturally competent, age appropriate, needs appropriate, and we need to be looking at our students holistically, even if they are not into that quote-unquote 25-year plus.
James, if you'd like to offer a thought on these questions too, and then I'm going to invite, while he's answering, folks to have questions, because we're going to move to Q&A in a second.
Yeah, first, appreciate the work of my colleagues on developmental education, which I think is a really great example of how we can do things differently and move the needle on student success at scale. Secondly, child care for students has been a priority for the administration, and we've consistently sought increases in Seek Campus, which is our child care program for college students, and we also have a proposal that I hope Congress will see the wisdom in helping students connect with the broader safety net. And I think that is something that I would like to see higher education do more of, because I think in our colleagues who are working on other aspects of the upward mobility problem, be it childcare or housing or nutrition, do not have an accurate understanding of who students are today. And many of those programs have eligibility requirements that explicitly carve out students, even though students badly need that support. And you are making it more difficult for them to move into self-sufficiency and into the middle class. So, I think we should do a better job at all levels reaching out to our colleagues who are working on other aspects of the economic opportunity, just to better educate them that we are in many cases trying to help the same people.
Would there be anybody in the audience who'd like to pose a question to our distinguished experts here? And if you are, let me know and I'll call on you. Got in the center here. And what I'd like you to do is stand up and tell us who you are and keep close to a question rather than a statement.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for your perspectives, and I think they're very helpful for all of us. I'm wondering, as you're talking about access, social mobility, and how we bring more people to our gates, if we need to redefine our gates. In other words, we still look at the model of higher education in a very traditional way. And, you know, I'm aware of a particular school that's looking at going beyond that and even credentialing trades, for example, redefining higher education. And it's not unheard of. It's done in Europe. What do you think about that kind of outreach here in the U.S.?
I couldn't agree with you more. Turf, tradition, and trust. We don't have any of those, right? Like, we don't trust anybody. They can't, if there wasn't in our classroom, that can't be the same competencies. And so what we've done is we've done work where we partnered with SoftBank and their entrepreneurs. And they went through a 16-week program. And at the end of that, we gave them 12 credits towards our data analytic programs. So I think we can't continue to do prior learning experience and job experiences in pilots. We have to be able to do it at scale, and part of it's going to be being able to take those skills that are learned outside of maybe a college setting and build that backward and kind of re-engineer. I think the other part, and many colleges have done it already, is building out multiple terms, multiple entry points throughout the entire calendar year and academic year. I do think a place that doesn't incentivize it is the way that we award Pell. And so we really can't do it at scale until we have a redesign of how Pell comes out. You're saying 12 credits. Once you get very creative, and we're all working hard for Workforce Pell, because I think that Workforce Pell will give that flexibility to the way Pell is distributed to really do the work at scale and align the skills to the resources and then to a credential pathway, which is seamless.
For me, it's a variety of items. I don't want to replicate European model. I really don't. We have an American model. I'm not saying it's great, but it's not a bad model. I think we have to modify it and do it on a regular basis, and we have to think toward the future when we do it. In other words, we have to bring employers to the front end of this gate and not to the back end of the gate. And we also have to think about, and use our data to think about how we forward our state toward, in my opinion, everybody's heard me say this already, you have to look at higher education truly as the driver here. And if you think about it, if you're going to have a healthy economy, you're going to have a healthy workforce that's trained. In order to do that, you have to have a healthy higher ed system. But the higher ed system is not just the entry level of those certificates, in which we're up, but it has to be certificates that matter, right? It has to be those that really go to help sustain a family and also hopefully help build wealth. But you're also going to have to think about it. You're going to need a lot more people with baccalaureate degrees. You look at the data. You're going to need a lot more people with a lot of things. So disaggregate what you got and move toward that. The other item I would argue is that we also need to think about things like competency-based programs. We need to meet students where they're at, rolling admissions, all of that without a doubt. But it's also, we will have to get engaged, I think, with all the different constituencies to help them to see what's on the other side to make that happen. One of the pieces that I feel good about what we're doing in Kentucky is with our P20, how we're using our dual credit to do alignment, not just saying you get a dual credit course and that somehow prepares you for college. Many may not make it to a college campus, but you're going to have to help them to see where this dual credit course will lead to, and you got to get them on a campus to see. We're going to have to strengthen our online-based systems even to have more engagement, like the last panelist said. But the point I'm trying to make is let's not just try to replicate something someone else did somewhere else. Let's build a system in our culture that actually helps everybody. And we cannot forget about equity. If we leave anybody behind in this process, we haven't done our job. That's why our performance-based funding systems need to focus on our underrepresented populations, on our low-income populations, on those majors that matter for the future of your state. For me, it's Kentucky. Anyway, there's a lot to that answer. I just don't want to say let's replicate what Europe's got, and somehow that's going to be the panacea.
The gentleman in the middle there, yeah.
Thank you all. Liam Knox, I'm a reporter with Inside Higher Ed. Thank you all for your insight today and for being here. My question is for you, James. Obviously, you know, we're at a state of higher ed panel. The FAFSA rollout has been probably one of the things that have defined this year in higher ed in an incredibly eventful year in higher ed. You mentioned that now is the time that the dust is settling, that the form is up and running smoothly, there's no backlog, but it is also May, and people I speak with, you know, kind of, to extend your metaphor, still taste the dust in their mouth in a lot of ways. Are you worried, you know, that, how do you get completion rates that have been lagging up this late in the spring? And how do you reestablish trust in the FAFSA form so that you don't have similar issues in the fall? Is the department strategizing ahead like that? And are you concerned that these effects will kind of, you know, have a lingering power?
Yeah, I think we're focused right now on getting the FAFSA submission rates up, and we talked about that a little bit. We do have a lot of momentum, and we are making progress week by week in closing that gap. But there's a lot of work left to do. And this is really a all hands on deck situation. And we at the department are doing everything we can think of to get the word out to students that now is the time to fill out the FAFSA. We are emailing them, we're texting them, we're reaching out through press, we're reaching out through stakeholder groups. We found these new resources to invest in grassroots activities, from FAFSA nights to phone calls to social media campaigns. So we're going to leave no stone unturned here. And you know, our guiding principle in the recent months is to make sure that every student can get the help that he or she needs to pay for college. And that's going to continue to be our guiding light. We're going to continue to run through the tape and bring the same sense of urgency that we have to FAFSA submission and supporting students in colleges through the rest of this year.
I think we have a question in the back.
Hi, thank you all so much. I'm Rachel Rush-Marlowe, Executive Director of Research Ed. I have another question on the FAFSA. At the campus, state, and federal level, you know, you've all talked a lot about mitigation strategies, ways to support students, get completion numbers up. We work a lot with rural institutions in particular, but more broadly have a concern about how this is going to impact campuses this year. You know, with the potential impact on declining enrollment, we know a lot of institutions, even before this, were at risk of closure. And so just wondering, you know, from a campus, state, and federal perspective, what you all are thinking about in terms of mitigation strategies or support for institutions that are going to also be grappling with this.
From a campus perspective, we'll go campus, state, federal. One of the things that's going out next week for us is both the superintendent and I are sending a letter to every household in Miami-Dade County about the resources available for college. And so that'll be a joint letter that's pretty historic. Typically, that wouldn't happen. We felt that it was really important. And, you know, we even talked to our university partners, and they're like, just go do it. So we can, you know, not a time to compete about, oh, they'll get a letter from Miami-Dade College, but not FIU. And the letter is just simply, FAFSA's up and running, their resources, come to college, here's the website, here's a phone number, here's open house dates. And I think that we have time. quite frankly, the students whom we know we're going to lose are the May, June, July students, and there's time to recover. You know, the college going, the valedictorians of the classes were applying, you know, in October and November and January, and they'll have an impact too. Some of them are waiting for that aid to make a decision, and to make a decision to maybe be able to go away to a university and build that social and economic capital that's very different when you stay home at your local college, right? So I don't want to underestimate the importance of those decisions, that not having the full picture in February may have impacted some of those students. But I think we can't sit back and say, well, they messed it up and we're not going to do it. We've got to do a full court press. We hope that the grant resources that are out there help us continue to do it. And I would just say collaborate, partner, and go to TV stations on PSAs. Everyone knows what's happened with FAFSA, and we have an opportunity here to use a crisis into an opportunity.
Well, I appreciate the question. I'm from a mainly rural state, as you all know, and I have many institutions that are really going to be affected by this. What we've done is, I won't repeat myself too much, but we're working with our P12 counterparts. We're working with other folk that are community-based in those regions. We're working with our local community colleges, four-year institutions with Gear Ups. We have a rural Gear Up system there, as well as a statewide Gear Up. We are actually going into the middle of the community. The only way you can address this, especially if you're in a rural community. But a lot of the conversation, once again, is around, we will give you the help you need. You also have to remember that so many people are afraid of the taxes, right? You know, many may not have a tax statement to give. Many people are afraid to give that information even. So a lot of this is more than just helping them to fill out the FAFSA. It's convincing them that FAFSA is the direction for them to go to become affordable. So we are worried about that. I'm proud to say Kentucky was one of the highest gain in enrollment states last year. We're going to continue to do that one way or the other. I'm dedicated to that. But we're also going to have to think about those low-income rural students, first-gen students, those inner-city Jefferson County, Louisville area. It's going to take really a more targeted communication. We can get our churches engaged, and that's what we're doing to reach out to those populations.
I appreciate both of those examples, and I think those are great examples of what state leaders and college leaders and local leaders can be doing right now. You know, we take seriously the needs that colleges have to get through this year, and through our college support strategy, we have set aside 50 staff within federal student aid. We have called through about 1,500 colleges to ask them what help they need. Some we have referred to outside nonprofit groups that support colleges with financial aid processing. Others we have visited. We visited more than 100. And so far, we've been able to meet the need for colleges that request it. So, you know, certainly recognize that this year hasn't gone as planned, and that has meant a lot of extra work for colleges and universities, among others. And, you know, right now, there's a lot of anxiety and uncertainty about what next fall is going to look like. And, you know, no one at the department is taking that lightly. We understand how important the FAFSA is, and it has been, you know, long days, long nights, working through holidays for quite a while now to do everything we can to get students the help they need and colleges the information they need.
I just want to add, Undersecretary, clarify if I misread it, or I understand the department has also lifted verifications for this go-around, so that is a major implication for our institutions. Typically, about 60% of students get flagged for verifications. Means you cannot process the file, you cannot award the aid until you get the verification documents. It's my understanding the department has lifted that during this time so that we can really accelerate awards and get true awards in the hands of students and families to make a decision. So I want to applaud applaud the department, the undersecretary, for listening to colleges and universities that felt this was just going to be the next barrier and impediment for students and families.
We will still follow up on cases where there's suspected fraud and a few others, but it will be the lowest verification rates, even lower than what colleges had during the pandemic, and lifted a variety of other paperwork requirements around recertifications and program reviews and data reporting, and continue to have engagements with the community and open to other ideas.
Let's sneak in a question over here.
Hi, I'm Deborah Cromie with Trellis. I have a non-FAFSA question, if that's okay. As I listen to you all talk about meeting students where they are, the majority of students today are not traditional coming out of high school, right? They've worked a little bit, they've tried college, a lot of, I think there was over 40 million, some college no credential in the country. And the way I've started to look at this population that's moving forward is education is nonlinear for them. Yet our programs are still designed as 2-year and 4-year programs, and we measure completion at a 4-year or a 6-year mark. I just wondered if you'd comment on the fact that if we're really going to meet students where they are, do we need to relook at and rethink about policies around the fact that students today are looking at education in a very different way, maybe getting a credential, maybe working, maybe their employer then pays for them to take some additional courses, but I don't want to say lifelong learning because that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the fact that jobs are changing so quickly.
So there's
AI.
a fluidity.
Exactly, and I just wonder if there are policies or things that institutions or you are looking at the state level around how we prepare for that, because that may be a way to address the demographic cliff issue that we're worried about.
And real quick here.
So, and I will add one, teacher shortage. And this happened at the college level, and then the state made the decision. We went out and researched why our teacher candidates weren't finishing their last semester. Well, we found that we had a requirement. You had to leave your job, pay for your last 12 credits, and then volunteer in a school for 16 weeks. Who does that? Well, with the superintendent, we created a residency program. They are now hired by the school district full-time with benefits. They get a senior teacher mentor. When they finish, we take the credits and we graduate them. So we created a teacher residency program that now has been put into policy at the state level, and then developed a teacher apprenticeship program that helps us earn while they learn as well. And then the last one, and it's been at the state policy level in our curriculum framework, just about every program now has a stackable credential. You come in one semester, you earn a college credit certificate, you earn an industry certification, and that has a seamless transition into an associate's, and associate's into a bachelor's. And so I think those are ways that are real pragmatic ways in doing it, and whether it's tuition reimbursement or whether it's getting workforce Pell, there's going to be alignment on policy and financial to come along with the changes we've made in the way that, students come back or access education.
I'll just quickly say a couple of things that are important in this conversation. First of all, it's a heck of a question because you're absolutely right. We need, iPads need to change in the way we're measuring. We're leaving out, many of our part-time students. The way we fund students need to change. We also need to look at, yes, on things like credit for prior learning, ways that we can meet them in the workplace if they need to, way we can do community-based learning, rolling it, all those things that we've talked about before needs to be put in place. We put in our performance funding model this year an adult learner metric, and a part of that is funding now will define how we need to do those wraparound services as well as those other items that they need differently than some of the others. That's what we did with our low income and our underrepresented populations. And because of that, we had number 2 in the country in completions, those. So we're going to have to target what we're talking about. But yes, we need big policy changes around iPads and the way we're measuring, no doubt. But we also need our inputs and our dollars need to match those strategies in such a manner that is targeting those students. And we also work with employers to think about what those students are really needing to get there. There's a whole lot more to that, and I know we're out of time, and I won't say anymore.
And the future of education is personalized. So it will not matter as we do these traditional, non-traditional pathways. The future of education is personalized. And I think every one of us has to reimagine the way students access and have that personal experience with their education journey.
Would you all join me in thanking our panelists? Courtney, over to you.
Thank you. So as we draw our event to a close, I want to extend my deepest gratitude to our esteemed panelists whose insights and expertise have truly enriched our discussions today. I'd also like to extend a heartfelt thank you to our expert moderators. And as we prepare to part ways, I want to leave you all with a call to action. Today, we've delved into the complexities of higher education, exploring challenges and opportunities. But our work does not end here. It's up to each and every one of us to take what we've learned and turn it into meaningful action. Whether you're an educator, a policymaker, a student, an advocate, or a journalist, there is something you can do to make a difference. It might be advocating for policy change in your community, implementing new initiatives within your institution, telling the story of today's student, or simply lending a listening ear to a student. Whatever form your action takes, remember that even the smallest of gestures can have a profound impact. Together, we can build a future where every individual has the opportunity to access and succeed in a quality education, but none of us can do it alone. We have to work together. Thank you once again to our amazing partners and hosts, Stephanie Markin and the entire Gallup team, to our panelists, moderators, and most of all to all of you for coming here today, for standing in line and joining us. So thank you all and have a fabulous day.